Okay. Well, so I'm Leslie Shad. I so appreciate Bill introducing me, and you just have a great program. I'm just so excited to listen to all your speakers and updates, and having a computer update. I think that is like so useful for real life, So I love that you do that. Anyway, I'm from Natural Habitat Evanston. We are all volunteer, and we're trying to change the culture of lawns. And I'll tell you why in about 1 minute here. Let's see if I can get through this. First, I wanted to say what we're thinking about when we're talking about a lawn. So typical lawn maintenance for a rose garden or whatever. Yes, I can. I guess I want to be able to reach the mouse. Is mowing every other week, fertilizing, watering during the growing season. I'll come out here. Broadleaf herbiciding walkways, insecticides for rose gardens and such, blowing leaves and dust away from plants, and mulching leaves and plant stalks and hauling them away. That's normally what's sort of involved in a lawn. And you can see it's quite a bit of steps, to keep your lawn going. Well, this is a different idea. This is actually my front yard. This is buffalo grass down below. It grows about 6 inches. And that's, of course, coneflower. And so many people ask me, why? It's only one lawn. Why do we have to be concerned about it? Well, NASA has done satellite imaging that shows that turf grass is more land use than corn, wheat, and fruit trees combined. In addition to that, we overwater. We overwater by half, basically, of our lawns. And of course, you're taking water from your hose. So in terms of climate change, what you're doing is using treated water for your grass for the most part. I mean, very few people use gray water. And 30 to 60% of municipal freshwater supplies are spent on watering lawns. In addition, because it's right out our back door, we over-apply pesticides and herbicides. We apply at 10 times the rate that farmers apply. And then we use lawn equipment. And, we may say that many of our lawnmowers and blowers are, renewable energy. You can have plug-in of blowers and things. But even if you're using plug-in electric leaf blowers, you're still coughing everything up into the air, and you're coughing up about 5 pounds of all the debris that's on the sidewalk, which includes, dust and particulates and all kinds of things that can cause respiratory problems. I can't do that. And at 5 pounds per hour. So it gets coughed up and it stays suspended in the air. In addition to that, there's hearing damage and vibration damage from using the lawn equipments. And then what is turfgrass? Well, turfgrass, it's a species native to Europe and Asia. It was an emblem of privilege. You can imagine that, in order to manage a lawn, people needed a labor. They needed a crew, So it was an emblem of privilege to have a lawn. You needed somebody to come cut it. And I'm talking about at the turn of the 1900s. And the way that we manage it, mowing it, we cut off the tops of the grass before they can do provide any benefit to wildlife. So we cut off the tops of them. We mow before it produces seeds, nectar, and pollen. So it's really not doing anything for insects or birds. And it, of course, just displaces native plants because there's so much space being used by lawns. And the thing that I get concerned about, especially, is that most of us have experienced, or of a certain age, have experienced the die-off of insects. I think probably all of us here recognize that in the 60s, when we would be driving, our windshields would be covered with insects. We would have insect splatter all over our windshields. And now I can tell you, in July, I drove from Evanston to Toledo, Ohio, and had 2 insects on my windshield. It's just not happening anymore. So we've all personally experienced this. But in addition to this, there are, some specific instances. The rusty patch bumblebee is now a federally listed bumblebee. It's declined 87%. Many people know about monarchs that we're hoping for a rebound, but they're down 90%. Mayflies are even down. And there was a New York Times article that these are all sort of the charismatic megafauna of the insect world. But there was a New York Times article that mentioned, that, there are these key species that people recognize and watch for, like bumblebees and monarchs, but a whole insect world might be quietly going missing. And that to me is really scary. So, what's the solution? I mean, I should say, okay, many people don't care about insects, but often they care about birds. We also have about a third fewer birds, 3 billion fewer birds, 29% since 1970. And insects populations and bird populations are just totally in sync. I think that probably makes sense to all of y'all, but 96% of land birds, which means songbirds and such, but not like ducks, rely upon caterpillars and other insects to grow. And for example, there's an entomologist who studied chickadees, and he determined that for 5 chickadees to fledge, it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars. You can imagine caterpillars being super valuable to birds because basically it's a walking around leaf. It's walking around foliage. It just spends its day, walking around and collecting nutrients, and it's soft and squishy, so it's easy for songbird babies to digest. And why do we care about birds? Well, I don't think I even have to spend time on this. I would say, we all know that they provide seed germination, pest control, in terms of here's a raptor eating a rat or something. They're an indicator species. They're a fellow species in decline. But I think the reason that we probably care about birds is because they provide beauty and music. They belong in our ecosystem, and they link us to something bigger than ourselves, wild and familiar. I mean, I get emotional just saying that. Excuse me. And the solutions are so simple. The solutions are to do less. The solutions are to mow less often. I'm going to talk about these things. You can use no-mow grasses. You can shrink your lawn area so it's not such a big area. You can add a few plants that are really important for insects, keystone plants. You can leave your leaves, and I'll say why. Probably some of you have heard about why. Reducing pesticides and fertilizers, because obviously if we're trying to encourage things, we don't want to be killing them. Dimming our lights, I'll explain that. And then protecting birds from windows. If we're creating a nirvana for wildlife and nature, we don't want to kill them at the windows. So these are no-mow mixes. Now, I'm not saying that no-mow options are the same as turf. Turf is, it's a crew cut. It's very neat looking. It's, different than no-mow grasses. If you're not doing a no-mow grass, these are basically grasses that are about 6 or 8 inches tall. And you can mow them. Of course, you can mow anything. So you can still mow them. And if you do mow them, you are, still reducing the water. You don't need to use pesticides, herbicides, so there are benefits from using no-mow, even if you mow them, but you don't have to mow them. So this is the no-mow mixes that many nurseries provide. Look like basically this. This is non-native grass. This is mostly fescues and other things that are bred to be short. These, again, you would mow this once or twice a year. This is Pennsylvania sedge. It's a native sedge. It grows sun to shade, so it's a real option. And then this is buffalo grass, which I have in my yard. It is not the same color as turf grass. It's a green-gray color, and it really only greens up starting in warm weather. So starting around May, June is where it starts to, look not yellow. It'll stay, it's a warm weather grass, but it is a native grass to the United States. So, and it's very drought tolerant. But another solution is just planting a more diverse garden. And that's really the better solution than any monoculture. This is a neighbor of mine who started out with Pachysandra, pretty much, and she transitioned it into a wildflower garden. This is the garden in about May, and here it is in late August, I would say. And you can see that she cares about birds from this because, birds want not just ground and then trees. They want all the layers in between. So she's created shrubs, tall shrubs, and understory trees, as well as tall trees in her yard. And this is her parkway garden. So she started off with the grass, and she transitioned it to wildflowers. And there are lots of options. If you're, for wildflowers in shade, I just listed a few of them, but, in shade, you can have wild ginger, you can have ferns, wild strawberry. In sun, there are obviously tons of things that grow short in sun. So yeah, there are lots of options. And this presentation, by the way, will make it available so that you can look at the options here. If later on, if you want to look at what native turf options there are, buffalo grass, oak, James, or ivory sedge are the main ones for either sun to shade or for all sun. And then how do you do it? So this name of this presentation is on transitioning. Here's how you transition, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about all the process. But first, this is called cardboard lasagna. You gather up boxes, strip off the tape, lay it out on your yard. This is basically what I did in my front yard. I ran out of boxes, so I used some newspapers, and you have to make it pretty thick if you're using newspapers. Lay them all down, and here you cover it with compost and mulch. And I seeded right into this. I seeded buffalo grass, which goes great from seed. I seeded buffalo grass into this in April, and also some coneflowers along here. And there were a few things I wanted to preserve, which was kind of a bad mistake because it allowed Creeping Charlie to come through. But basically, if you put the cardboard down entirely, it will kill whatever is under the ground because you leave it on there, you don't take it up. And by August, I had buffalo grass growing and purple coneflowers growing. And this central area I also retained, and this is an oak tree. So many people, when they're thinking about growing a pollinator garden, they often think about nectar, pollen, and seeds as being important for wildlife, berries and nuts, and maybe you think about trying to, have something growing across seasons. That's fantastic, and that's really important. Nectar and pollen for pollinators, seeds, berries, and nuts for birds, and trying to keep something there from winter all the way through, spring, summer, and fall. But I want to mention host plants because host plants are basically the to opt for native plants. The earlier things that I talked about, I don't know how to back up. The earlier things I talked about were nectar, pollen, and seeds. And those insects are fairly indiscriminate about using nectar or pollen. They'll take nectar and pollen from whatever they can find. So pretty much whether the plant is native or non-native, insects will go look for those plants, and they'll look for zinnias, which are non-native, all sorts of things that they can find that they can get nectar and pollen from. But host plants are more specific. Host plants are basically for example, many people know that monarch butterfly caterpillars need milkweed, and they need it because it's their host plant. Monarch butterflies co-evolved with milkweed so that they developed an enzyme that allows them to digest this very toxic, bitter tasting sap, and that actually makes the little caterpillars toxic so that other things don't eat them, but it also is required for their evolution. Well, the thing is that there are these relationships between native insects and native plants in 90% of insects that eat plants. So if you think about what is an insect that eats plants, well, bees eat pollen, that's part of a plant. Beetles and ants eat foliage or parts of plants. Caterpillars, of course, eat foliage. So 90% of all these insects that eat plants rely on a specific host plant or family of host plants. And this is a Chicago Field Museum guide to Chicago area butterflies. And it also describes their native plants, like who do they rely on? So for example, the violet fritillary, named after the plant that is its host plant, it needs violets. The pearl crescent butterfly, a very common little thumb-sized little butterfly, relies on asters, any kind of aster. The eastern comma butterfly relies on elms and nettles. And I'm going to say something briefly about nettles. Nettles are also important to the red admiral, which sort of, is sort of like a little bit like a monarch butterfly. And the spicebush swallowtail relies on the spicebush. So let's see. Oh, good. I think I got going there. I want to be sure I didn't miss something. Okay. There's a professor from the University of Delaware who's an entomologist, so a bug scientist. And he looked at all of the trees and wildflowers in North America, basically, all the native ones, and said how many species of caterpillars rely on that particular plant. So these are the Illinois numbers. So 456 species of Illinois caterpillar rely on oaks. And without oaks, some of these species will also use hackberry or willows or other plants, but 456 species rely on oaks as one of their host plants. So oaks are the most important. It's a keystone tree. It's the most important tree in North America for wildlife. And you might say, well, why is he, these are all the numbers of caterpillar species. Why is he ranking these plants by caterpillar species? Well, he's doing that because caterpillars are a foundation insect to the whole food web. Caterpillars feed spiders, they feed other insects, praying mantis and beetles. They feed mammals like chipmunks and possum. They feed turtles and reptiles, amphibians, fish. Caterpillars are just a foundation animal for the food web. So that's why he's looking at ranking them by how many caterpillar species they support. So the top tree is an oak, but quickly followed by cherries and willows and birches. And these are all native species. This is when we create, when we bring in, for example, I'll do Japanese cherries. If we bring in a Japanese cherry tree, that's great and it's pretty, and it might provide some pollen or nectar for bee visitors. But that is a tree that's native to Japanese native insects. So there are not, very rarely are there American native insects or North American native insects that rely on Japanese katsura trees or Japanese trees. There's a mismatch here. So it's great to have them, but they're not supporting our native insects that are in such steep decline. And the top wildflowers, I'm happy to talk more about that and to talk about cultivars, because cultivars are the human imagination of what we should have for plants. And the human imagination can change the chemistry of the plant so that it's completely inedible, because monarch, for example, the monarch example I gave, they evolved to create a specific enzyme to digest this plant. So when you mess with the chemistry of a plant, cultivars might provide some benefit, but you really need testing and research to know whether they're providing benefit as a host plant. So anyway, wildflowers, the top wildflowers, goldenrods and asters are really the best. There's also a native clover that is really good for supporting, more than 100 species of caterpillar. And then this, I just took a smattering. This is not a priority list. I just took a smattering of some other plants to give you a sense. So Joe Pyeweed, 33 species of Illinois, caterpillar. This is, by the way, a morning glory prominent that was just on my glove. This is my glove. I just thought he was so cool. And just seeing him move, he looks like a little alien and he is so adorable. So love caterpillars, just saying that. So these are nettles that you probably have in your yard, because many people would say, well, okay, nettles are a host plant, but I never want to have nettles in my yard. They sting and they're bristly. Okay, well, these are non-stinging nettles. These are very common around Evanston, at least, and I'm sure they're where you live. You probably pull them because you think they're, they don't really have much of a bloom. They're basically, for most of the year, they're about 8 inches tall. They get to be like 18 inches sometime around August, and they have both of these have little tiny little blooms along them. But basically, they're very important for, this is what red admiral caterpillars are looking at to try to, feed their caterpillars. This is what, Eastern comma, I think, is the other one that I listed that is, wants to feed their caterpillars these nettles. So my suggestion is, you can look at, there's an online app called iNaturalist. You can look them up and see, you know, take a picture of the plant in your yard and see, is this native? Maybe it's helping somebody. And then, of course, at the top, I've listed resources for later on if you're looking at this. I also wanted to call out, you know, what we're going for in terms of our gardens. I have a close friend who was a curator at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and a great person. And he's managing a native garden, and he got milkweed bugs on it, which are bright orange and black beetles. And he said, you know, we got to get rid of these milkweed bugs because, you know, they're eating my milkweed. I'm team milkweed. And, you know, it's great that he's team milkweed, but you know what? We need bugs to eat our plants. If they're eating our plants, we've got a healthy ecosystem in our yard, you know? So this is violets being eaten by probably things like violet fritillaries, and this is choke cherry. And those are good things to go for, some insects eating things in your yard. But we also want to have our neighbors like our yard. So you know, some of the things that we, you know, landscaping tips. I mentioned, you know, we want nectar plants and host plants. I try to avoid cultivars. You know, both humans and pollinators like to see big groups of the same plant. So if you plant in banks of plants, plant 6 plants at a time or 3 plants at a time, it attracts more pollinators. And humans also think that they're a little bit more, it's more intentional looking. You can save spots of bare soil for native bees, avoiding insecticides. Everyone knows height toward the back, shorter in front. Know your sun moisture, leave your leaves in plant stalks. You know, for humans also, put sedge or grass around the outside edge so that there aren't plants just flopping over into walkways. Plant densely, because then you can, that reduces weeds. So if you keep things, basically, if you're starting a new garden, plant everything in 1 foot, basically 1 foot from each other to let them grow in and fill in and reduce weeds. It also is humans like focal points. It seems it's something, you know, identifiable that makes the garden seem intentional. So a path or stepping stones, a fountain, a bird bath. Rocks can add a focal point, and then a sign explains what you're doing and can help. I also was mentioned to me about containers might be of interest. So containers, you know, they should at least be 12 inches deep. You can totally grow native gardens in containers. You know, there are lots of options for, you know, what kind of container to use. Glazed evaporates less than unglazed if you're using that kind of a pot, a terracotta sort of pot. If you're on a balcony, remember the weight, including the water, because you're going to have to water lots in containers. They dry out more quickly from wind and all. And in winter, consider whether it will crack or whether the container needs insulation. And this is not, I'm going to not go through the details on this, but this is just to show, here are container plants. And everything in orange shows how much food it provides to insects. So, you know, ferns provide, you know, is a larval host for different insects. Solomon seal provides nectar and pollen as seeds, as well as a larva host. So there are all these insects. And then I have these funny words in here. This jack in the pulpit, for example, there's a little insect called a thrip that only will eat jack in the pulpit. So it's not a, it's, you know, there are certain bees and certain ants and thrips and leafhoppers that only will eat one particular plant. And that's true of the jack in the pulpit. That's also true of alum root down here. There's beetles and aphids that only eat this alum root. I've also mentioned leave the leaves, and maybe it's not, you've maybe heard about that, but I'm going to tell you why to leave your leaves. So these are insects that, first of all, many people recognize a woolly bear probably. This is what the Isabella moth it grows into looks like. The woolly bear, you know, in fall, it'll be crawling around in your garden, and it'll stay in your garden all winter. Basically, it's, you know, its blood turns into like a glycerol, so it turns into kind of an antifreeze. Mining bees just burrow down in your topsoil, and bumblebees but the bumblebees die off except for the queen, and she crawls into an animal hole, like a mouse hole or something like that, and will overwinter in your garden in the topsoil. These guys are on plant stalks, so also wanting to leave plant stalks. Some people say, well, just be careful about how you clean your plant stalks. Well, this is the Luna moth. This is a huge moth, about 4 inches across. It's our biggest one. Well, one of our biggest. There's another moth as well, but one of our, for sure, it's, I think, our most beautiful moth. It's a really astounding moth if you've ever seen one. And this is what its chrysalis looks like. So I'm just saying there is no way, if you're cleaning up your plant stalks, you're going to be able to say, oh, this is a chrysalis and not a moth. That's the same true of this giant swallowtail. They just look like little leaves if they're in your garden. This is our native Carolina praying mantis. So there's a Chinese praying mantis. It's eating all these guys, but basically this is our native guy. And you can see the plant stalk. This is a little fuzzy of a picture because it's so small. The plant, his egg sac is just basically a little bit of an engorgement on the plant stalk. So you would hardly notice that at all. And by comparison, this is the Chinese mantis egg sac, just, so you might notice in your garden. The Chinese mantises are the ones that are sold in many garden stores and online as a biological remedy. So they are quite large and can take out a lot of native insects, and they'll even hang out by a hummingbird feeder. So I don't know. These are more insects that are in our plant stalks and leaves. So this is a gallfly. Many people have probably seen the enlargement on a goldenrod. It prefers sort of, I have all these host plants mentioned here. It prefers kind of the tall goldenrod. So maybe you don't have that kind in your garden, but it's basically a little egg is laid in there, and you might even see that a woodpecker goes for this gallfly, trying to eat that little egg. You'll see a hole in there where somebody's tried to eat it. This is a hibernacula, which are basically a bunch of little caterpillars will gather up in there and sew themselves into a leaf. Again, you would never notice that. This looks like a tiny little cigarette of a leaf. Same thing with the tawny emperor. This is the tawny emperor butterfly. He's just wrapped up in the corner of a leaf during the wintertime. So this is his face. You gotta love a caterpillar face. So, and then, I'm often asked how long to leave the leaves. So these are guys, this is why you really don't want to remove your leaves. If you're focusing on nature, I realize we all have different objectives in this. But if you're trying to encourage nature, nature wants you to leave the leaves. The leaves decompose. They provide nutrients to your shrubs and your trees. You do need to get them off of your grass if you're trying to preserve your grass. Get them off your grass and into your flower beds and underneath your leaves and such like that. But here are some of the reasons why. Obviously, all spiders, they're out all year round in your garden. They have that whole glycerol situation. And again, little cute spider, just saying, little jumping spider here. Fireflies spend about 2 years in your garden as larvae. This is what they're glowworms. Maybe you heard the word glowworm. They're about 2 years as glowworms and about 6 weeks as flying in your garden. So, most of their life is spent in your garden. And this is one of our native ladybugs. This is what its larva looks like. So it's crawling around in one form or another in your garden. These are not the kind that will crowd inside your house. Those are the Asian ladybugs. This is my poster child for leaving your leaves all year, because this is a butterfly that overwinters as an egg. And this is what its caterpillar. So its eggs are laid in fall. And, they'll basically be frozen hard until it really warms up, which is 50 degrees for the most part. So that's really May before they start to emerge and the eggs will hatch. But of course, then they're caterpillars. They're not immediately flying out of your garden. They're caterpillars, and that'll be for weeks as caterpillars. And so it can easily be June before you have this caterpillar has turned into a butterfly and emerged from your leaves and such. This is just to explain a little bit more. These are ones that overwinter as caterpillars. A lot of butterflies will live the winter. In fall, their caterpillars will burrow down at the base of their host plant. So this is the Baltimore checker spot, and it will burrow down as a caterpillar. At the base of its host plant is the white turtlehead. White turtlehead is a plant. Here it is. And so when the weather is warm, about 50 degrees, come about May, its caterpillar will crawl up and start eating the host plant, and developed in eventually, actually even probably later than May, and then start to develop into a chrysalis and then into a butterfly. This is the violet fritillary. This is what it looks like, burrowed into the bottom of violets. It will crawl up, and again, it will really be easily June before it's metamorphosed into a butterfly. These are butterflies that actually overwinter as adults. So they are usually the first ones you see in spring. Most commonly, the mourning cloak, this guy, just looking around for him. We do see them in our gardens. I've included their host plants. You can see that their host plants are elm, hackberry. So they may be in the bark or in a wood pile. And this is the question mark. It's called a question mark because it's got a little question mark here. And by contrast, this is the comma. It's got a little comma. It doesn't have the dot. So just cool, just sharing. I mentioned as well, reducing, lawn equipment, which you can avoid by leaving your leaves. In terms of nature, leaf blowers are just not good for nature because they blow too fast, too hard, and then the leaves are towed away. But most of this I've already mentioned. It blows up particulates into the air. If it's a gas blower, you're blowing smog into the air and noise pollution and all of that. Yard crews most affected, but everyone is. A quick touch on pesticides. So you probably all know, to avoid pesticides, but there's some that are super hard to avoid. Neonicotinoids are one of the most common insecticide in the United States. Ortho and Bayer are the brands that usually are selling neonicotinoids, and these are the chemicals you're looking for on the labels. Neonicotinoids, the reason they're so bad is that they are, first of all, nurseries often spray them on the soil. They spray them on the soil because they're trying to avoid any microorganisms that are in the soil, so that when they give you a plant, they're not giving you Japanese beetles or something like that. So but there are alternatives to using poisons to get rid of the Japanese beetles. But in any case, and in fact, the more that they're, cultivated with no Japanese beetles, you don't have to do that every time you sell a plant is to poison things. But the neonicotinoids are systemic pesticides. So that means that when you spray them on the soil, it not only poisons that plant, the whole plant will be poisoned. So the pollen, the foliage, the rainwater can also spread the pesticide to neighboring plants. Further, it persists in the ground. So Xerxes Society, this insect nonprofit, did research and showed that rhododendron treated with systemic neonicotinoids was poisonous for 6 years after planting. So it continues to kill insects for years and years afterwards. And American Bird Conservancy, nobody is supporting these. These are banned in some countries and the European Union, but not in the United States. The American Bird Conservancy said that did research again with that one treated seed can kill a song sparrow. So it's just not a good thing. So the answer to that is ask at nurseries whether the things are treated with neonicotinoids. Just asking spreads the word. I'm almost done, but I wanted to do a quick call out about lighting. Lighting is also contributing to the decline of insects. Many of us maybe remember this. This is not as common. You're not seeing as many insects grouping like this, but basically they're just captured by the light. It's not that they're eating something, it's just they're captured by the light. But when they do this, they attract way, way, way more predators. They're overpredated because of the lights. And lots of studies have looked at this and determined that it is actually contributing to the decline of insects, because what will happen is spiders and other insects will hang out in these locations. Birds and bats also will overhunt here. And you might say, well, that's good for birds and bats. But the problem is it has contributed so to the decline. It used to be that some birds like chuck willows and nightingales and things like that. Nightingales, am I saying it right? Chuck willows and whippoorwills, sorry, would just fly through these clouds with their mouths open to catch all these little insects and gnats and moths. And now we have a steep decline of whippoorwills and chuck willows because we've had such a decline in insects. So we've got to clean up our act here. This is the white lights in particular are attractive to insects. So the answer is use light if, when, and where you need it. Keep it orange, red, and minimized, otherwise dim. Brighter isn't safer. I'm going to say something about that, and you may make up your own mind about it. But basically, we're going for light where we need it and night and less accent lighting. This is the same house twice, obviously projecting into the air. When light is basically turn off lights by 11 p.m., especially in migration. We are in migration right now, has already started. Many of you may have noticed red-winged blackbirds and grackles in your yards. Those are some of the first migratory birds. And when you need to use light, shade it, put dimmers on. Motion sensors are great because then if somebody's approaching, obviously the lights flip on, but that rarely happens when there's a spider crawling over, Amber red. So amber is good for birds. One of the other issues with bright lights is they tend to draw birds down in migration closer to windows, and you get more bird strikes around bright windows. So amber is good for birds, but fireflies in firefly season, if you're trying to encourage fireflies, you need to turn off your lights or they need to be red lights, basically. And the reason for that, and in my own yard, I don't always leave lights on, just for the 2 weeks that I have fireflies, to be honest. The reason that amber lights are a problem for fireflies is that they blink, especially the females will blink amber colored lights. Their amber is their color. So when there are amber lights around, they stop blinking and you lose that whole generation. You don't have females blinking to attract male mates. So they just completely stop competing, and we are really having a decline of fireflies. This is, okay, you may make up your own mind about this. This is obviously only a photograph depiction of this, but when there is a bright light, how well do your eyes adjust to seeing somebody coming in the doorway? When a bright light is shaded, it actually allows your eyes to adjust better. Don't believe me on this, try it in your own yard. So I just want to say, everyone is like, well, brighter is better. You could determine how well your eyes adjust to a bright light. And as mentioned here, there are human health effects from this. There's a whole dark sky movement because we are never getting dark skies anymore. And cities are very bright. Chicago is one of the brightest in North America. And it does contribute to human health issues, obesity, depression, sleep disorders and such. And for animals, it impacts their hunting, hiding, nesting, navigating, communicating, all of that. So how to spread the word on some of these issues? You may not have a yard. You may not, have a place where you can plant, goldenrod. There are small goldenrods. You don't have to plant an invasive goldenrod. But, what you could do is you can ask your apartment building. You can ask your condo. You could ask your place of worship. Would they consider mowing every other week? Just mow every other week instead of every week. Or would they consider a no-mow grass in part of their area, or just even put in a pollinator garden in one of their lawn areas to shrink their lawn a little bit? Or would they consider leaving the leaves or adding a keystone tree or a wildflower to their garden? Nurseries, ask about neonics. Asking is part of the solution. Asking is doing on this. Asking janitorial staff where birds hit. If you have an apartment building or if you live in an apartment building, you can ask where birds hit, and janitorial staff usually know. This is from a YouTube video where he is just drawing lines on his glass. That works entirely. And I have this on my kitchen window, and you just use a ceramic pen and make these lines 2 inches apart. You don't want to have gaps too big. This is also showing window films for birds, that how easy, you can definitely see out. It's not as if your eye adjusts to having your windows treated. You just even also joining or supporting a native plant sale. these are posting a sign. These are some of the signs that we've used and encouraged. And I guess that's it. I think that's it. So anyway, that's the end. I cut off the end of my talk there, but let me see if I can't do this. Yeah. So I have at the end of this slides some of the links to the Field Museum guides and more information on the rusty patch, more information on plant selection. And that's the end of that. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much and I'm happy to answer questions. Did I? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. I could also answer questions in the chat if somebody wants to help me with that.
We will do that with you, Leslie, after the Q&A from the auditorium.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, I thought your presentation was really great. For all the years that I had a yard and a home, I'm in an apartment now. I didn't know any of this, but I did want to ask how your neighbors, and I know you have one neighbor that planted Pachysandra. They're probably cool with you. How about the other neighbors on the block? Do they are an exception to some of the things you do?
I've never had, I am the only, so the neighbor who I mentioned who had the Pachysandra is actually around the corner from me. On my block, there is not one other garden like mine. And my garden, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm crazy, you know, wild on my garden. I do have buffalo grass around so that it's 6-inch grass around the garden, basically. I've never had anyone have any negative comment on it whatsoever. I mean, what I would say is my best ambassadors for my garden is that I have so many goldfinches eating the anise hyssop along in the garden that when people come by, the anise hyssop goes, and all the, you know, goldfinches take flight, you know, and people, I mean, people come to my garden. I mean, people, you know, if I'm outside, I have conversations with everybody about everything. I sure did when it looked like, you know, the turf, the cardboard lasagna. That was the best in terms of the people being like, you know, what in the world is going on here? They would stop and talk to me about this. I mean, it was just very, you know, helpful as a way to spread the word on this. They were like, what are you doing? You know, this, you can, besides that, before I put the topsoil down, it looked like this. People are like, what? So, but, you know, that lasted, you know, it looked like this afterwards, you know, and then people are okay with it. You know, it looked like something was going to happen. So.
Okay. How many inches of mulch and topsoil do you put over the cardboard?
Okay, so the real answer is 4 inches, but the amount that I had and did was about 2 inches, 2.5, 3 inches. I didn't have, you know, I mean, this was probably 3 cubic yards of mulch and compost. So that's a lot. 3 cubic yards. If you think about a cubic yard, I mean, that's kind of like that tall and around 3 times. So that's how much I got for this. And I did about 3 inches. And yeah, within it does, the wetter it is, the quicker it deteriorates. And so we had, it just happened that it was not a particularly dry spring, so that everything started to kind of germinate pretty quickly, and then the cardboard does deteriorate pretty quickly. So yeah, worked okay, you know.
So are there a list of local recommended places like the chalet or other places that you can get plants that are not neonics?
Yes. So I have called around to all of the, you know, to 30, 35 places, and I do have a small list. Not on my list are places that say, well, you know, on our natives, we don't have any neonics, but we can't attest to what our growers do. If they say that to me, they're off my list. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm Natural Habitat. I'm just going to recommend places that don't have neonics. And so that is really native nurseries. And well, there's Shady Grove Wildflower Farm in Evanston. There's Rebecca's Natives, and I think, well, Winnetka, I think. There's a handful, but it's not Chalet, it's not Gethsemane, it's not City Grange. Those places, they, for their natives, they will tell you that they're okay for neonics, for the ones that they're growing, but they don't know what their growers do. And I want to push that, I think the nursery should be asking their growers, what are you doing and how are, test it, do a little certification, you're not using neonics. So, I can definitely send that afterwards. If there's some place to post that, I can give you a list of some.
I have a question about the use of rain barrels.
Okay.
How much use are you seeing of them? I live in a condo area, and the idea of rain barrels sends them into a panic.
I mean, you know what? I do see a lot of rain barrel use. I mean, they do require some maintenance because you need to have the mosquito, clear in there, and you need to use the water, So I'm not opposed to rain barrels, but I'm not super enthusiastic about them. But it does require some maintenance and attention to it. I mean, the reason the bird baths are fine, by the way, in terms of mosquitoes, is because it takes 7 days for a mosquito to evolve and fly. So as long as you're changing the water every week, you're fine with that. But that doesn't happen as much with rain barrels. So they can be issues for, West Nile and stuff like that. Yeah.
Leslie, have you ever been involved in a prairie reconstruction?
I have been involved in that, but yes. Do you have a follow-on question about that?
No, I was and we did a prairie reconstruction at the City of Chicago High School for the Agricultural Sciences. And we did a 4-acre prairie reconstruction, and the kids went nuts. They absolutely went crazy. And I say a prairie reconstruction, you couldn't walk through because the buffalo grass got to be waist high, and you lose the little kids in there.
Yeah.
So you couldn't find them.
Okay. Well, so a lot of what I do now is to encourage trees, to be honest, because I found that we do a lot of work with schools. I do a lot of work with schools in low-income neighborhoods, basically. And I found it was really hard to keep pollinator gardens or prairie gardens alive, because you'd get to be August and then nobody wanted to schools were out of session and nobody was really watering anywhere near enough. And I just found that trees are easier to keep alive. People will water a tree. It just seems like there's more of a connection to it or something. So we're planning, I have 80 trees I just purchased to go into Evanston area schools, all native trees.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's what we're focusing on right now. So
we're now going to go to the questions on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you, Arnie.
Pick that up, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnie. Excellent presentation. You've answered some of the questions. Let me pick the ones that you haven't. How do you feel about vegetable gardens? Is that a whole other bag, or?
No, I'm totally in favor of vegetable gardens. Okay, first of all, one thing that I am actively also working on building are food forests. And there are native food forests. I mean, there are a lot of native plants that are edible. There's hickory and different berries, serviceberry, hackberry, raspberry, blackberry. That there are a lot of native plants. There's also onions and things like that, leeks. Those are all native plants, right? So first of all, you can plant native plants in your vegetable garden. I mean, in addition, there's hazelnut. There are all the nut trees. So lots and lots of things are edible that are native plants. But in addition to that, I mean, we need food. Most vegetables are not native. Most vegetables are cultivars or non-native plants. But they still provide the nectar and the pollen to pollinators, and they're still important. I would say that the issue with vegetable gardens is, whether you can manage, are you using insecticides? That's the main issue probably that would be for me, because that's where, You can use, I would just say, soapy water will kill almost anything with a little oil added. Soapy water with a little oil. Most insects, a lot of insects breathe, have little holes and pores that allow them to breathe through their skeleton, So if you have soapy water with a little oil, the oil covers those holes and those insects will smother, right? So I would just encourage you, aphids, you know what? Aphids are not that big a deal. I would spray them off with a hose, hose water, or, and you have to keep on it. I mean, that's the problem with, natural ways of managing insects. But that's the only thing I would encourage is trying to reduce your insecticides if you're doing a vegetable garden. See how that works.
Thank you. Thank you. Pete and Hetty are asking, why are there so few praying mantis today compared to years ago?
Oh, that's interesting. Immediately what I'm thinking is I also work on a restoration of a farm area in restoration to forested wetlands in Indiana. And we have tons of Chinese mantises. There are Chinese mantises. They're kind of cool because you hear them like scissors coming over to you. It goes, and then they land like near and they watch, and they turn their head like that, So they're kind of freaky, but they're very cool. So I see quite a few of those, and I still see walking sticks. But you know what? I think there are fewer insects overall. I mean, that's probably because of insecticides. There is, I have had conversations with some of the biological controls companies because they're selling non-native ladybugs, non-native praying mantises. The non-native praying mantises are very large, and they, I don't know this myself, but there's a lot on the internet about them hanging out by hummingbird feeders and grabbing hummingbirds. I mean, so, you guys look at that and see what you think. But, the big mantises are surely taking out our native praying mantises. I recently put there was a Chinese mantis in my garden in Indiana, and I put it in my, they're very interesting creatures, even the Chinese ones. I put it in my turtle tank. I have a turtle tank, and it's got a native ornate box turtle in there. That praying mantis, when it saw that turtle, it was like, it freaked out. It ran to the corner and it stayed in the corner. I had to feel bad for that little praying mantis. But he never got eaten by the turtle, but he just totally freaked out. They've got a lot of personality, praying mantises. I don't know that answered your questions. I think probably insecticides is why, but it might be competition from, Asian mantises that are just sold. And the thing is that one egg sac from a Chinese mantis, that's like 500 or 1,000 eggs in there. I mean, they're tons of little babies. If you see them get out, they're little tiny mantises that crawl out, and they fully look like adult, insects. They're not like larvae looking like, they look like little tiny baby. That's what they are, mantises. They're cool.
Thank you. We have a couple more. Someone is asking on the iPhone, I have some patches that need grass seed. What should I use? And I guess I'll amplify that by saying, how would I put something in that might be better than what's there?
Right.
And yet, it would have to stand out because it wouldn't match what
That's the issue. Yeah, that's the issue. So, I mean, you know what? It is, I mean, what should you use? I mean, first of all, honestly, if you did no-mow grass seed in patches, you still can mow it. If this is a part of a mowed garden, you might as well put in no-mow grass seed. That you could get it from prairienursery.com, from prairiemoon.com. Garden Edens is a landscaper in Evanston that sells no-mow grass seed. So you can get no-mow grass seed, and that's a non-native grass, but it is actually hardier than some of the, Pennsylvania bluegrass or something like that. The other thing to do is, use a patch as an opportunity to create a garden, or to extend a garden area. The other thing is, why is there a patch? oftentimes there's a patch because something doesn't want to grow there. So, so maybe go with the flow on that and, see if it's an area under trees or something, try a shade garden instead and try to put in some ferns or, as far as I can tell, wild ginger and, big leaf, aster tend to grow pretty well. And I mean, in a lot of different situations, sometimes there's too much, salt or something like that, so it can be hard for anything to get going. But I might go, if it were me, I would be like, I think I would, you know what? I'm going to go with the flow. This is kind of an opportunity to have a different plan. So, yeah.
Last question. I have a magnolia that's bursting out early and I see other things happening early. Do you have any general thoughts on how our climate is changing to be warmer? And does this hurt or help what you feel is going on in our area with your objectives?
Well, it definitely hurts. I mean, but yes, there definitely are. I mean, the red-winged blackbirds are here earlier than I had on my calendar from, years before. I put some of these milestone, critters on my calendar, and they're definitely here a little bit early. Usually hummingbirds are here around tax day. So we'll see, whether they get here earlier than that. With plants, of course, one of the issues while we're in this transition period where everything is so uncertain, things may bloom and we may get, maybe we'll get frost in another 2 weeks, so that just is not good for plants that are trying to bloom. I mean, they may put all their energy into blooms and then then die. And then, in the long run, of course, this is not good. I mean, in the long run, we're, insects, birds, things are going to migrate, try to find different locations. It always, honestly, I find it disturbing to see some of these, whale sightings and things that are in the Mediterranean or, walruses in the north, around England, southern, I'm like, these are animals looking for food and they've just lost their, way. So that can't be good. I mean, but in any case, this is where we are. And I think that I would take heart because I feel, we don't know what the future is. Maybe it's really, really bad, but maybe things will adapt and maybe some species will be, pioneer and thrive. So I think it is what it is. And we just have to see how this plays out and support, our local ecosystem as best we can.
Thank you, Leslie.
Oh, I also have, Judy pointed out to me. So I also have some handouts if anyone wants that. And I also have some seeds. And I'll just point out that these are the type of species and there are separate little envelopes inside. If you want to take one of the envelopes instead of the whole, 5 seed.
Leslie, would you be willing to share your slide presentation to attendees if Jill were able to send those out, or are they available online?
I'm happy to do that. Yes, for sure. That would be great.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it back to the auditorium. Thank you so much.
Thanks.